Hi, everyone. We'll in a couple minutes. We'll let a few more parties join. Thanks for joining, everyone. We'll get started in about 30 seconds as folks are logging in. Okay, hi everyone, good afternoon, and welcome back to the Delaware Valley and New Jersey HIMSS virtual conference, Game Changers in Health IT. I'm Debbie Yogle, board member with the Delaware Valley HIMSS chapter, the program chair for our chapter, president-elect for next year, and I'm also our virtual event. But I'm not doing HIMSS related activities. I work at Christiana Care in Newark, Delaware. I've been joining our virtual sessions. I think NJDV committee really did a great job this year. This morning, we heard a great panel discussion with leaders in the health exchange space, and our exciting agenda is about to continue. It's my pleasure to introduce Russ Branzell as our closing keynote session, The Future of Health IT Related to COVID-19. But before we get started, I have a few housekeeping announcements to share with you. First, and importantly, I want to thank our New Jersey and Delaware Valley chapter sponsors. Without you, we wouldn't be able to offer fantastic virtual education like this. Please take some time to visit the sponsor sites that are available on the program website, and we'll be adding that link to that shortly, so you'll be able to get to that site when this event ends. Secondly, as a reminder, during the webinar, you can type questions by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. If time allows, we'll be addressing all the questions at the end of the presentation. And lastly, and maybe most importantly, please stay on for the duration of our presentation as we'll be announcing the winner of our $200 gift card at the end of the session, and you must be present to win. Now I'd like to turn it over to Chris Bradley with Ford Telecom to introduce today's keynote speaker.
Awesome. Thank you, Deb. And well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Bradley, and our company is Ford Telecom Help. We are a national telecom technology consulting and expense management firm based locally in Westchester, PA, and Carlsbad, California. So we offer telecom expense management, wireless expense management, carrier project management, and currently working on provisioning cloud expense management to our clients, since it's a big hot topic. We assist healthcare organizations in reducing their overall spend on telecom carrier services. We do this by offering wireline and wireless carrier audits to reduce expenses within current telecom spend. We also assist IT departments in streamlining their carrier contracts, bills, and inventory monthly. And we do this by accessing carrier portals and setting up EDI feeds, which directly flow into our own proprietary telecom expense management software called Titan. Once carrier feeds are in our Titan software, we can validate carrier expenses every month and provide customer access to ensure accurate ongoing reporting. We understand for many healthcare organizations, finding savings is extremely important right now due to the impacts of COVID-19 on overall healthcare business revenue models. So if you'd like to learn more about our audits or see a demo of our Titan software, please feel free to reach out to myself, Chris Bradley, at cbradley@fordtelecomhelp.com, or you can contact me on my cell number at 484-947-9998. So it is my pleasure to introduce today's closing keynote speaker, Russell P. Branzell. Russell is the CEO and president of the College of Healthcare Information Management Executives, also known as CHIME, and its affiliate associations, the Association for Executives in Healthcare Information Security, the Association for Executives in Healthcare Information Technology, and the Association for Executives in Healthcare Information Applications. In addition to his position at CHIME, he serves on the faculty of Columbia University, where he teaches executive classes in health information technology. He also is a member of the Board of Overseers of the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award, position that was appointed by the Secretary of Commerce. Mr. Branzel joined Chime as president and CEO in April 2013 after being an active member for 15 years. He served on the Chime Board of Trustees from 2004 to 2008 as chair of the Chime Education Committee from 2004 to 2008 as well, and is the chair of the Chime Education Foundation. So I will turn it over to Russ.
Thanks, Chris. When we ever go over bios like that, generally just makes me feel old at this point when you get to spend time doing that. So thank you very much. Thanks for having me. I greatly appreciate you all asking us to be part of this great program. We were reminiscing before the call started, and another reason to feel a little old again was Debbie was one of our students now quite a few years ago and still looks quite young. So again, time is flying, and COVID time is flying even faster. So we're going to spend a little time today, and we're going to explore a few thoughts and pull on a few threads as we go through a few concepts and ideas. Some of this was truly laid out well before COVID. I would love to tell you we are great prophets and that we saw all this coming. The reality is, I think we saw some of the ideas of technology change and transformation and digital health coming. We didn't necessarily see a giant catalyst to come that occurred to us in March. We're going to talk a little bit about that and some of the impact that we're seeing right now and why this is so significant. Right now, we are in a unique time and place. Obviously, you all know that because probably a vast majority of you are probably doing this from your homes or alternate locations because of what's going on. Now, it was quite a few years ago when we really started this journey of understanding what we as leaders in healthcare needed to do. And over time, the names have changed even. We were IT leaders and IIS leaders, and now we're using the term digital health. But the reality is, it was not that long ago when we were trying to really understand what it was for our roles, no matter what they were, to actually lead in healthcare. IT generally were the ones hiding in the basements, and still to this day, in many places, the IT operations still reside in the basement. But really what has occurred is over that period of time, this is a formula some of you may have seen either myself or others use. We helped develop this now over 15 years ago, and it was really an attempt not to judge people, not to necessarily, decide what kind of leader you were, but rather to help people grow and mature. And over a long period of time now, and as I said, we were reminiscing about that, I've been teaching our leadership academies and boot camps now for, I think, close to 17 or 18 years. And we've seen people do just that, grow in maturity, grow in their positioning, and grow in their importance in the organization. But even now, we would have traditionally called that most senior person the CIO. Today, we have chief digital officers and chief innovation officers and all kinds of other titles. The reality is we've looked at this maturity model, and when we've talked to a lot of chief executive officers and other senior leaders, including board governance leaders, what we've heard is something very clear. One, we still have a lot of room to grow, even on this scale, that many of us, I'll include myself, need to continue to sharpen our skills and continue to become that person driving change in organizations and truly driving the impact that technology and those solutions can actually do to improve health and care. And as we look at that, that's really a maturity model for us to judge against ourselves. It's not necessarily for somebody on the outside, for Chris, who just introduced me, to go and say, okay, that person's a 1.5, so this and that. That's really not the intent. The intent here is for us to be able to really focus on this. Now, one of the more sobering moments is when I was with about 25 senior CEOs from some of the biggest systems in the country. And I asked them, how many of you already have a 2.0 leader running IT, running transformation from that perspective? And only one hand kind of went up. And it was a pretty sobering moment when I realized we've been working so hard and educating so many. But then I realized, well, maybe I'll ask one of those career limiting questions when you make CEOs mad. And I asked them, I said, well, how many of you have a 2.0 CFO? And really no hands went up. I said, how about a 2.0 CNO? And really no hands went up. And then I actually pushed them pretty hard and said, well, self-judgment, how many of you have a 2.0 CEO? And the same thing. And what I really realized was the work we've done the last few years on these next couple of slides really are across the entire C-suite and actually across the entire leadership spectrum of healthcare. 2.0 isn't even good enough anymore. The reality is we're being pushed into a whole new frontier. We need to be looking at this from a true digital platform, true digital healthcare delivery model, where we actually have to, and we're going to specifically just talk about IT leadership. And I don't care if it's somebody working in one of your firms like Chris is, or some of the others that are on the call, Rob, whoever else might be, or it's somebody working in a provider setting. These general rules now hold true. At least we believe they do. First and foremost, we have reached a point of operational management 2.0. Well, what does that mean? What does 2.0 operational management mean to you on a day-to-day basis? Basically means everything works all the time. Now, that's a pretty lofty standard. Matter of fact, I jokingly call it the new Amazon standard. Anything I want, anywhere I want, how I want it, delivered when I want it and where I want it. That's just kind of the world we're in. We're in the Amazon standard era. Now, all I've got to do is use this analogy from March of what happened in days. We knew the theory was there. Any piece of information on any device, anywhere, to any person, and then wrap around that securely. We all knew we would eventually have to get there. We just didn't know it would happen in weeks. The reality is we now have a commodity service, even though it's not being delivered in a commodity way. The expectation is it always works. We were talking last week, some senior IT leaders across the country, and they said the acceptance of downtime now is 0. If we come with any kind of downtime plan for the year, it's considered failure. But we're not at that level of reliability yet. So we still got a lot of work to do because the standard's higher than we can often reach. But there's now expectation that our leaders continue to advance, not just in the organization from a structure perspective, but more importantly from a strategic impact. That we are literally driving strategy in the organization. One organization I talked to said 2 years ago, their whole platform was for the organization to be about 5% digitized. And their original goal was 5 years from that point that 50% of their organization and care being delivered was digitized. They've now ramped that up to a 3-year timetable. That 50% of the care has some significant digital delivery mechanism. That's a major change in how we think and how we operate from our old kind of cottage-based industry called healthcare. I won't go over all these. I'll just go over 2 more. One being change leadership. Why is this so different? Because every one of us has been trained in some format of change management, PMOs, project timelines, budget management, actual deliverables, whatever the case may be. We can all learn that, go to a school, do whatever. Any of us can do change management. Every one of us do change management. Change leadership, though, is really, really hard. Change leadership are helping human beings through the emotional, physical, spiritual, whatever you want to call it, change process, the psychology of human beings moving from one point to another, even if not physically, at least in their workflow. And most of us, if not near all of us, have never been trained in that concept. So as we move into an era where, one, we're seeing each other less during COVID, and we're still doing significant digital plans, and we're hearing that across the entire globe, by the way, that people's plates were full before, and now they've seen the benefit that we can do things in weeks. Let's just pile more onto the plate. We're going to have to help people through dramatic, dramatic change. And then last and not least on this list, I won't go over all the rest of them. They're a little bit self-evident, and we could spend all day just on this slide. And that is the concept of relationship management. We as leaders in healthcare have to become masters of relationship management. And it used to be, I'll just say it used to be easy. We used to be able to interact with the people inside the walls of the hospital, maybe some, contributing physicians in the community, maybe a couple businesses. The ecosystem now that we have to relate to, build relationships in, are entire communities. Sometimes, depending on your health system, entire regions, states, in your case, across New Jersey, Delaware Valley, all that region. And probably now, for the first time ever in most of our careers, across an entire country, and in rare cases, depending on your organization, across the globe. Maintain, build, and foster meaningful relationships to get great outcomes. That sounds simple, but it's amazing when we talk to other leaders how few really do it well. And again, most of us weren't trained on how to build and maintain meaningful relationships. Maybe back in kindergarten, but not as professionals. That's just not something we've learned how to do. So as we look through this, we really have to understand kind of where we are, for lack of a better term, in history. We have reached an unbelievable inflection point. Now let's ask you to do just a little bit of self-reflection here as I explain this. Every single person on this call, every one of you, doesn't matter, and I can see at least 3 names on my little window here, so I'll pick on those. Chris, Debbie, and Diane. Every single one of those, and everyone on this call, without exception, was born into, raised, educated, went to follow-on schooling, started your professional life, and have had your professional career in only one industrial revolution, the information age. Not a single one of you, no matter how old you are, have anything to do with the previous revolution. Mass production, Model Ts, the assembly lines. We all grew up with it. That was just there. But we only know one thing, and that's the information age. That's all we know. It's why we're in this profession, as a matter of fact. But if you talk to any economists, if you talk to any really futurist leaders at this point, they will say, we're probably in the 4th industrial revolution and we just don't know it. Well, how can we say that? Well, we didn't know we were in the information age till much later. We didn't call it the information age till many, many, many decades later. So what is the 4th industrial revolution? Well, it's so relatively new that we don't even know what to call it yet. It's kind of like, what do you call the generation that's being born right now? Well, some people are calling it Generation Alpha. Why? Because it's new. They don't know what to call it quite yet. Same thing here. I call it the artificial intelligence age. Some others do that. Some call it the 2nd information age. For purposes of today, I'll just call it the AI age. Why is this so significant? Because when you shift from one industrial revolution to another, dramatic and monumental change occurs no matter what you try to do. You can't stop it. You're shifting curves. And it happens in a way that is very disruptive. It happened before. In every industrial revolution, jobs were deleted, they became obsolete, and new jobs were created. We see it today. How many innovation officers did we have 3 years, 4 years ago? Almost none. Now they're all over the place. Why? Because we're changing the world we live in. And there are certain attributes that are unbelievably true when you're in a revolution and you're in the change. Things become far less expensive. Things become much easier to acquire. And generally the quality improves. So I would argue all you have to do is think of a few things in your life. Wayfair for furniture, good quality furniture, far less expensive. One click on your phone, 2 days later, it's your house. Amazon, perfect example. Slow day at the Branzel household yesterday. There were only 4 Amazon deliveries yesterday. I'm sure there'll be many more today. It's just the way we shop. We do part of our food shopping that way. We generally don't go out during this period of time. Most things are just delivered to our house. It's easy. Our lives become convenient. We all think it's because of COVID. The reality is every bit of the 4th revolution to enable that took advantage of the 3rd, and now we're in the 4th. It's an interesting time if you really look at it from that perspective. Let me just throw you a few terms here that we start talking about almost every single day, we the industry. Some of these have almost become cliche. And the reality is, when you look at this list of advanced technologies that are on the forefront, really the forefront of really invention, we have not seen anywhere near the potential of all these things. And where we are in that process, we realize we are, and this is nowhere an exhaustive list. And that's why we had the last one on there, and other cool stuff, because there's lots of cool stuff happening every single day. Now, if I were to ask somebody, and again, I'm just going to keep picking on Chris because he did such a good job at introducing me. So if I would ask Chris 3 or 4 years ago, hey, what's your drone strategy in healthcare? You know, the answer probably would have been the drones. That's what we play with out in the field after work, or we go out with our friends or our kids or whatever, and we go out and play with drones. But now you look today, just a few years later, University of Utah, 7 approved FAA landing sites on there for drones the size of cars. And they're testing these things now. University of Maryland, delivering organs for transplant across campus via drones. Almost every major pharmacy, the big ones like CVS, working now with Amazon to figure out how by the time you get home from the doctor, your meds are waiting for you on the front porch by drone. So now you go to almost any health system in the country and you ask the question, what's your drone strategy? Unfortunately, it's still a lot of them would give the first answer, but far less. Now take all that list and put it together and say, what's my overall advanced technology strategy? And it's to dramatically change healthcare in almost every conceivable way. And part of that is understanding this. A few of you have heard me talk about this. Now, what's interesting is we've been using this for probably about 5 or 6 years. We had a Chime speaker come as one of our fall forum keynote speakers, and he talked about this. And I was just mesmerized by the philosophy and the theory here. And so I've done a ton of research on this. Now, what's interesting is how many news channels, how many Dr. Fauci, so many others out there that have actually used the words lily pad theory during the period of COVID, because it's absolutely followed this theory. And the theory is quite simple. On day 1, you have a pond, there's 1 lily pad on it, it doubles every single day. On day 30, the pond is full. So using that philosophy, how full is it on, say, day 28? For those of you trying to do the math really quick in your head, it's not that hard. So if it doubles every day and it's full on the last day, then the day before it was half full. And the day before that, it was half of that. So on day 28, it was 25% full. And then before that, 12.5. And you know that you can do the math yourself. But the whole theory here is there's been change going on for long periods of time. Massive disruptive change occurring, and you don't even see it. Matter of fact, the argument is you don't see it, and at least in this model that we're showing, till about day 24 or 25. And by then, there's a simple economic theory. It's too late to react. Laptop ownership, cell phone ownership, access to compute power, access to broader communications, access to medicine, home ownership, car ownership, world wealth. We can go through 1,000 examples, and everything follows this model. That if you can see the change, maybe see the change a little earlier in the process, you can ride the wave up. Matter of fact, one of the biggest ways you know you're in this model is if there is a catalyst that occurs that breaks the model and makes it move even faster and shrinks the middle part and makes things happen in a dramatic way. Well, we had just that in March. You all know this, you're living it. I don't need to belabor that. And that is the COVID pandemic. Everything was in place for telemedicine. Everything was in place for remote work. Everything was in place for remote observation. Now, you can argue that we didn't have all the technology pieces, but the technology itself already existed. And it took a matter of weeks to take what would have taken an industry normally months, if not years, normally years, to implement and get through. And now I think we would all agree, to some degree, we'll never go back. Now, we won't be doing 98% telemedicine, but as I talked to one senior leader in one of the largest health systems in the country, they think they're normalizing out at about 28 to 30% now virtual care. They were at 4% before. As he said, I'll take a 7x increase in that short of a period of time because I'll never see anything like that again in my life. That's the world we live in. Matter of fact, many industries, you already know this, you just didn't see the curve because you probably came in based on your ages a little bit later in the process. I remember the first ATM machine, the beginning of digital finances that were out there. Today, we don't know any different. One of the largest net worth banks in the world, ironically, has the same name as our organization, Chime. I still get emails almost every day with people complaining about things. They think I'm the CEO of the bank, not the CEO of the professional association. And they have zero brick and mortars. They are a virtual company, just like the examples that we had before. You all know the experience, though we're not doing it today, the transportation industry. Everything used to be done by human beings in the past. Some of you probably don't even remember this or ever even experienced it, depending on your age. You used to go to a travel agent or you called that person up, you got your tickets, they were mailed to you, or you went and picked them up, you went inside, there was actually a person there that helped you through every bit of the process, did all the work at the airport. You didn't check yourself in, you didn't manage all your own stuff in a digital world. So we say, well, healthcare is different. It's so personal, right? No. Consumers are demanding it today. There's so much of healthcare that can be digitized. We experienced that in a short period of time. I don't think that was just a COVID thing. It was the opportunity to do it in a really horrific situation. And it's going to happen more. So the question is, what does the future look like? How do you react to this in ways that we never have before? We actually asked our members across as this was occurring, right in the middle of it. We thought, okay, this is probably dumb to bug them, but we're going to anyway. And we asked them, what are you going to spend most of your time on in the near future working on now that you realize what's happening? Yes, telehealth, remote medicine, working from anywhere, e-work, anywhere, anytime. How to do analytics for all the stuff that's occurring across this huge ecosystem. Basically, what they said is they're focusing on the digital world moving forward. They need to make huge investments to codify this and to reinforce it and actually make it part of their business world as we move forward. Now, you've all seen slides like this. And the reality is we are going to see it. We're going to see it happen soon. And that is, if you haven't already seen all the news, we are in second, in some cases, third waves, depending on what state you're in. But the reality is the part I mentioned earlier about helping people through all these changes is the hidden fourth, maybe fifth, maybe sixth wave, who knows? Job burnout, industry. I know 2 or 3 hospitals already on the East Coast that have opened employee PTSD clinics. And it is not just for the nurses and the physicians and other caregivers up on the floor. It is for IT teams that have been working obscene amounts of hours in a stressed out environment, all while at the same time being concerned about furloughs and other things. That's tough on the human psyche. This is a world now where change will move at a fast pace and people are not ready mentally to handle that. So as we think through this, it has caused us to step back, and we've really kind of re-looked at some of the stuff from a perspective that we've been talking about now for about 5 years. And I know Rob and a couple others have heard some presentations we've done about this concept of, are we really entering into the era of the rise of the machines, you know, the Terminators and iRobots and all that kind of stuff. And we've been making some prognostication about this for a few years. Little did we know, and in some cases, do we actually believe that maybe we were right in some of these. You know, and I'll just go through this quickly out of sense of time. I won't play the game we normally play, which is everybody yelling out their favorite robot. But the reality is, I'll just ask this. as you think about TV, if you think about the entertainment industry, just think about your favorite robot for a second. Now, some of you think that's too geeky. You don't even have a favorite robot. So just think of a robot as we think through this. Now, I went to the internet a few years ago. This was a list that was there, so it must be accurate. And so these are the top robots according to some scalar survey that are out there. Doesn't mean it's right. Some of you will be offended your robot's not on there. So I'm sorry. Now, some of you probably don't even remember this. This was KIT. KIT, in theory, was a car that could drive itself, think for itself, and be aware of its entire surrounding. That's almost every car today, or at least it is for some cars. Elon Musk thinks he's way past this in concept today, that they'll be at level 7 or 8, I think it's called, cars, which truly require no human intervention in any way. Car will even take itself to get maintenance done. We're not that far away. This was just an idea on a television show a few decades ago. Rosie. Well, I have a Rosie in my house now. It's a little Roomba robot thing that attacks my dog whenever it can, or the dog attacks it. But the concept of having a self-cleaning home, not that foreign anymore. Even this, a robot that travels with you. By the way, the worst named robot in the history of TV. Its name was Robot. That was it. Lost in space. Now, how? Why is this important? First, self-aware, truly aware of itself. Well, if any of you try to use Siri when you're on the road, or any of the self-listening stuff going on that's out there, you'll know it's pretty self-aware, because half the time it doesn't want to help you anyway. So just some concepts. I'll go through the rest of these pretty quickly just to give you some ideas. This was Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I can't never remember if this one is WALL-E or the other one. I think it's WALL-E. The first cyborg we really saw on TV, human and equipment put together. This one's called the Iron Giant, big overseas everywhere. Data, why is this one important? The first one with emotions. I can never remember what that one is. It's not WALL-E, it's whatever the other one is. I'm sure somebody can put it up in the notes there. I can never remember what that one is. That's the other one. Terminator, as we talked about. We've got the Transformers and C-3PO and R2-D2. Now, if you know what this one is, somebody should probably put up in comments. If you've got in your comments field, go ahead and put, if you know what this one is, somebody write in comments what this one is. If you know what this one is, that's the person you always hang out with. I bet you Chris knows what this one is. This one's called Boozer or something like that. And that's the party robot. And then finally, we have R2-D2. Why is this important? No different than an explanation I made with KIT. Our entire concept of science today is driven by what we saw in the past and what we want to see happen in the future. We grew up with this philosophy in IT that technology was mostly people, a little bit process, and really less about the technology. And as we move forward, that formula might change. It may very well that entire technologies are drop in that replace processes or completely augment the work of human beings. I'm going to give you a few examples as we go through this. So we talked earlier about that we're in the information age. I'm sorry, we're in the second information age, or as I would refer to it, the artificial intelligence. So the question really is, how long have we been in this artificial intelligence? That curve that I showed you earlier, that lily pad, have we been doing this for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? The reality is, here's the amazing part. Artificial intelligence has been around since 1956. We are way down that curve. Matter of fact, this has been being worked on. As a matter of fact, one of the robots you see there is the first robot ever truly made, called Shaky the Robot. It was named that because it was so unstable that all it did was shake. natural language processing, which all of you take for granted, even though sometimes it doesn't work, but the reality, it works pretty darn good. Alexa, Siri, all of these. That started back in 1977. Deep Blue, first person to ever be beat by a computer in chess. Statistical learning models, Watson wins at Jeopardy, deep learning, the game Go, which they said no computer could ever win because it required too much human thought. After it lost the first game, has never lost, ever lost again to a human being. So we're entering into maybe, just maybe, this pitch up. COVID has driven it maybe even faster that we'll have up. So what does that look like? What worlds are we going to live in? So let's just talk about this for a concept. So again, thinking in your heads, because we would normally do this, and I'd have you all yelling out really loud and we'd have some fun with it. How much faster? Well, I give you all the answers here, the way I built out. So I'll just go through them. 4G was 10 times faster than 3G. Now, some of you just want your 4G to work. But 5G, which is really starting its early stage rollout, can be up to 1,000 times faster. How much is 1,000 times faster? It means that basically I'm going to download my movie in 1 second, my entire MRI sequence in less than a second, my entire everything I've got in my medical record, my genome in 12 seconds or some amount of time. What it really means, and they're already working on things like 6G, 7G, and 8G, what it really means is, for the first time ever in all of our lives, we will be truly untethered. We will never need to be wire connected again for communication and processing. Add that to the compute capability and endpoint computing, cell phones, small devices, tablets, whatever, iPads, whatever, you now have the ability to process and the speeds to deliver it for the first time in humanity. In humanity, our entire lives, you will be completely untethered. Why is this important? Because part of the very premise of healthcare delivery today is to tether people to our health system. We proved that wrong in March. We didn't need to be tethered physically to a place. Yes, when something really bad goes bad, I don't discount that. And you provide amazing services when you do that. But what if the best cardiologist for you is in Australia? Or the best nephrologist for you is in England? Or the best whatever, pick whatever you want, is in India in the future? Maybe you want that level of care. Add to that with the concept of storage. By the way, this is like one of the first USB drives ever, a little bit big. I think it had 2 megs on it. It was a military thing. But now all of a sudden, what we're seeing is even on those same devices, storage will no longer be an issue. Why is that important? Well, maybe I'll carry my entire genome sequence, my entire medical record, every image ever done with me, everything I need for healthcare in my life will be on a small drive, a chip in my hand, a little Band-Aid strip that I carry around on my shoulder, whatever it is I want, with my untethered world and the processability to do it anywhere I want. That is a different world. And all of it really existed in February. You just didn't feel its impact till March. That's the world we're all living in today. Reality, as I said before, we've been doing artificial intelligence for a long time. Here's the amazing part. The same concepts that were involved in Deep Blue and the IBM computer there, actually at the exact same time did predictive modeling for breast cancer. And some of the advances we've seen during that period of time. That the same things for machine learning that we had are actually the same concepts back then that allow us to have cars that learn itself and traffic patterns today. And at the exact same time, allow us to do things in our workplace in ways that we've never dreamt before. Now let's just talk about chatbots for a second. Now that sounds really boring. Chatbots, the people you call, the thing you call to talk to for airlines, for cable service, whatever. Now here's the amazing part. Many of you believe, let me put it a different way. You know when you've talked to a chatbot. It's kind of that computer voice, press 1 for that kind of thing. The reality is, so many of you have talked to a chatbot, probably while home over the last week, and you had no idea it was a chatbot. Interacted with you like a person, asked you questions like a person, you had no idea it was a chatbot. Just one airline got rid of 75% of its human call interaction in a matter of a month. Here's the amazing part. Quality of service and the overall satisfaction of those calls went up dramatically after they were replaced by a chatbot. Just one health system in New York City, when they reviewed this, 880 jobs that its only primary purpose was to answer a phone. Go back to the revolution. Jobs change. Jobs are eliminated. New jobs are created. It's starting to occur in ways significantly for us. Even the concept of deep learning and mapping blood flow in the brain. Why is this really important? Somebody has an aneurysm, and you want to, as fast as possible, get the blood flow happening again. How fast can some of the best physicians in the world do this? In a few minutes. How fast can one computer system like this do it in? And about the same accuracy, probably better now. A fraction of a second. What if all they're doing is really augmenting and helping the physician for now? Don't eliminate the job, just do this. That's the world we're living in. And there will be something like this in almost every component of healthcare over the next few years. It is a different world than we've ever had. So some of you are old enough to remember this thing on the left. That's actually the old Star Trek tricorder. Qualcomm is actually putting one out. This is it right here in the second panel. Matter of fact, if you look at the list below, this is everything it will do. There's actually several other companies that have gotten some of the IP from them and we're producing their own versions of these. So concepts that we have that we've never had before. You've got things like the Lucas up there in the third panel, which is an electronic CPR machine that can apply the correct pressure every time while helping you breathe. All at the same time, it can do it on a single lithium battery charge for up to 12 to 24 hours. I don't know about you, but even in a CPR class, I get tired after about 30 seconds. And oh, by the way, it can deliver all that information through a satellite connection up to the caregivers and first responders that are coming. Major impacts. The thing on the right, well, for those of you that remember the movie Stranded, I think it's Stranded, and it's the one in space. And the reality is it's the Autobot or the Autodoc that can do all the surgeries. Well, that's not really a thing today, but guess what? Military is working on things like this for the field, for environments where there's not access to these really skilled physicians. Again, different than we've ever thought before. So are we going to all be replaced by the machines as we come forward? I don't think so. I don't think we're going to be replaced by machines. Why? Because I look at that formula on the left and it just makes my head hurt. The odds of me being able to figure that out anytime soon are pretty low. And I could do it probably with a little bit of time, but a computer had already done it about 1,000 times by the time I even mentioned the slide. But a computer can't really catch a ball today. A human can't interact with a human being the way we want to act with people. A human being isn't, a computer's not a human being. And it may be someday, it may not be able to know, but the reality is there's still a lot of room. And there's a lot of room for us, especially in this post-COVID world, to apply things to really, truly make care better, to help people do their jobs more efficiently, not just replace them. That's not what we're intending to do. What we have for the first time is an opportunity. Go back to that 3.0 mindset that we just laid out there. For the first time ever, we really do truly have the ability to deliver anywhere, anytime, really great healthcare and access to the people that can provide it. It's a unique world that we have. Now, we were joking about this beforehand, and I think it was Rob that mentioned, he said, the rise of the machines, are we really going to be replaced? Well, I have a simple test. This was a fun moment here for those of you on the call. I'm going to show a slide here in a moment, and this is a really hard game. This game is called Dog or Danish. Some of you may have seen that. If you've seen it, I apologize. Many of you haven't, so it'll be fun. So what I'm going to do is, and I'm going to pick on Debbie because Debbie's your incoming chair on this. And so when I show this slide, what Debbie's going to do is she's going to figure out, let's just for the argument today, how many pictures in this panel I'm about to show are actually dogs, not Danishes. So I think we've got this. I think you can all do this. By the way, only the real robots can figure out the right number. You'll know why in just a second. All right, we're going to start with the first one. The first one's called Muffin or Chihuahua. So hopefully you're ready, Debbie. I'm going to show the picture. I'm going to show you the picture for about the time that it takes a computer to do the actual formula equation there, because that's how fast robots work. So are we ready? Debbie, you got it?
No.
All right, Debbie. All right, I'll do it one more time. Tell me how many panels have Chihuahuas in it. You ready? Take a guess, Debbie.
8.
8. All right, does everybody have their guess? By the way, Debbie is a robot, because if you look really closely here, there are 8 pictures with Chihuahuas in it. Debbie, you're one of the first person that ever got. I'm really sure you're a robot now. I'm positive. All right, we're going to play the next one.
Talk about that.
What's that?
We did say that earlier in the call when we were doing this test, that maybe I was the
All
robot.
right, Chris, the next one is yours. Chris, are you still there with us?
Yes, sir.
All right, we're going to do the next one. The next one is called Bagel or Dachshund. So you got to tell me how many pictures have dachshunds in it. Are you ready for this, Chris?
Let's go.
I already know Debbie's a robot, so we're going to go with you now. Here we go. All right, how many?
I got 6.
You got 6. All right, Debbie, how many do you think it is? Because we already know you're a robot. Oh, she's still on mute.
7. I'm
7.
guessing.
All right, well, you're losing your computer edge. All right, so I'll show everybody again. You can figure it out. Once again, the answer is 8. By the way, this one's even harder because you can stare at it for a while and you still can't figure out which one you want to eat, which one you want to pet. All right, let's do the last one. And I'll let you both do this one because I can see both your little panels on the side of the screen on here. The last one we've got here is a croissant or a Shar-Pei. So I'm going to give you a full 2 seconds. That's a lifetime in computing capability. Here we go. Croissant or Shar-Pei? 1, 2. Chris, how many do you think?
And in each of the pictures, there had to be anywhere from, I'd say 18.
Well, how many panels had Shar-Pei?
Panels, I'd say 7 on the panels.
7. Debbie?
I'm going to say 7 also.
7 also. Way to stick with Chris on this one. That was impressive. Teamwork. You'd be wrong or right together. Well, in this case, you're wrong. The answer is, if you look really closely, you got to look really closely, by the way. The answer is 6. There are 6 panels that have Shar-Peis. Why do we do this? Because even computers, with their known biases, with their problems that they can't deal with in seeing things, all they see is if you tell them to look for Shar-Peis, they'd tell you that there's actually 12 panels with Shar-Peis, because they would put an attribute towards it that it looks like something, and they would tell you that these are all. Or if you told it to look for croissants, what it would tell you is that they're all croissants. Computers do have limitations. They don't necessarily have the ability, though, to interact with people like what we just did in the process. And that's what's most important for us as we look forward to this. Why is this so critically important moving forward? Think back to that definition, that world of leadership that we're in right now, where we're really having to be transformational leaders versus kind of an old historic way of doing things. You know, the question really is, are we willing to let go? I'll just tell you a quick story here. The first time I went to Australia, a colleague and I were there, and we came out of the hotel, and we had ordered an Uber in Australia, and a car came up, and the doors opened up for us, and it was a Tesla. The doors all opened up. We put our stuff in the car. The doors closed on their own, and there was a driver in the car. And we got in the back seat, like you do always in an Uber, and said, "Where do you want to go?" We said, "To the airport." And actually, I think he already knew we were, because we put it in the app. And we started driving away, and he turned around and started talking to us. He wasn't touching the steering wheel. He was just talking to us, completely not even looking at anything around him. And it was part of a new fleet of 10 self-learning, self-sharing cars. I freaked out. My friend, he didn't freak out at all. He thought it was cool and funny. He probably thought it was funnier that I was freaking out. And I'm like, and I probably said something dramatic, like turn around and touch the wheel, but I said it much more emotional and high pitched. And so we started talking to him about this. He goes, "Yeah, it's this new trial where these cars learn from each other. They change driving patterns before apps can ever figure it out, where the traffic jams are. And it drives it all the way to the airport. Matter of fact, if you share with us what airline, it'll drop you off in exactly the right spot." I said, "Does it ever not work?" And he said, "Well, yeah, the only time it doesn't work is when we come up with an angry cab driver or taxi driver, and then the car can't react fast enough." I said, "What happens then?" He goes, "Usually a wreck." And I said, "Okay, this is not good." But the real concept here is, you know, I fully admit it. I'm an older generation person. I'm 55 years old. That's not that old, but at least I keep telling myself that. But in my mind, a car is a thing I get in and drive, not a thing I get in and it drives for me. It's hard for us to let go of things that we've grown up with stereotypes. So as we're coming out of this COVID horrible pandemic, and we do try to find the silver lining or the good things that came out of this, and we look at all the opportunities that technology brings us now, like we've never had before, as digital health leaders, we've got to figure out how to put our previous biases aside in every conceivable way, because the opportunities would change dramatically. And these last couple slides kind of amplify that for us. So I love this last slide here. To be honest, I don't even know where it came with. Somebody shared it with me. So I'll read it to you. So what did we do before self-driving cars? Well, we just drove ourselves. Wow, nobody died that way? Oh no, millions of people died. Well, you think about that and you go, wow, that's a little crazy. That's absolutely true. I'm sure the technology is probably so good that this probably is an opportunity for us to save lives, save the way we do things, improve our quality of life. Now make this really healthcare specific. So what did we do before healthcare robots? Well, we just took care of people ourselves. Wow, no one died or got injured that way? Oh no, millions of people died and were injured. It's not as funny anymore. It's an interesting way for us to even examine ourselves and really question ourselves. What are the opportunities to make sure that more people are alive, have better lives, are not injured in an environment that still has way too much of that occurring? It's an interesting time for us as digital health leaders. And we know for a fact that we can make a difference. We just proved it a few months ago. Now, more than just a few months ago. It's an interesting time for us to be digital health leaders. So with that being said, Chris, it's been a pleasure to spend some time sharing you a few thoughts. Hopefully it was at least provocative enough to make you want to go out and buy a robot vacuum cleaner or something of that perspective. And I'm glad to answer any questions for anybody.
Thanks a lot, Russ. Can you hear me okay? This is Rob.
I'm sure. Do you want me to leave my screen up like this, or do you want us to just go to a regular screen?
That's fine, either way. whatever
right,
is
I'll do
easier.
it that way. How about we do it that way? Perfect.
Great. So thanks again. My name's Rob Foreman and I serve on the Delaware Valley HIMSS board and am involved in sponsorship and membership. And I've seen your presentations a few times and every time I love them. Every time I walk away with learning a lot of stuff and I really enjoy it. So thanks again for spending time with us. And by the way, we got general consensus on the robot. His name is Bender, according to
Bender, see, so even if I
multiple.
knew that, I wouldn't admit it because he's the party one and I don't want anybody to accuse me of that. So,
Exactly.
all right.
So I'd like to now open it up to any questions. There's a Q&A box at the bottom. So feel free to enter your questions. We have a couple of them. I'm going to read them off to you, make it a little bit easier. A couple of them actually seem pretty similar. One was around your view on how leaders should be preparing their teams for the future of work. There was another question I got that was similar about leadership and the fundamental change in terms of how healthcare is delivered, what's going to be involved in that, and what will be the biggest challenge for healthcare leaders.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I'll start with the skill set requirement, and it will be pervasive for all, because obviously you've got a generation coming in that were born as digital natives that really understand things that, be honest, some of us, I consider myself pretty adept at technology and using all these tools. And all it takes is 5 minutes with my daughter upstairs, who's 23, to realize I don't know what the heck I'm talking about some days in the world that they live in. And so part of this is we need to figure out how to capture that mindset and really take advantage of that and help, and it sounds crazy to say later generations, but that's exactly what some of us are that are even in our 30s, 40s, and 50s, and even beyond that, and get them up to the same competencies as the digital natives. More importantly, though, as we look at healthcare moving forward, and you think about the potential disruption, and I'm not going to try to be so prophetic and really lay out something huge. If you see what occurred between, say, cottage industry and mass production, skills were made obsolete almost overnight and new skills were developed. So the question is, what are the new skills? What are we going to have to figure out? Let's just pick on HIM as an example. We all know that many of the skill sets of HIM are either going away or at least contracting some because of electronic health records. Well, why don't they become the next level of data scientists? Why don't they become the next BI folks? Why don't they work in analytics? They already know where all the data is. So it's a perfect opportunity as technology changes for us to retrain a workforce. What I don't want to see happen in our environment is for us to say, oh, now these jobs are just obsolete, get rid of them and hire some different people. We have a chance to take an entire group through this journey in industry that we've never seen before, this kind of change. And when I really say we've never seen before, none of us have ever seen an industrial shift. And I think that's going to require all of us to really sit down and say, what do these jobs look like in the future? We never had chief innovation officers 5 years ago. What is one of those? Well, what's the equivalent of that in almost every job? And the reality is, I commend them. When I was sitting in that room, every chief executive officer that I talked to that day said, I have to reinvent myself over the next 3 to 5 years. If they do, that means every one of us do. I do in my job, you do in your job. I think the entire industry's got to reinvent itself.
Great, thank you. Can you expand on the importance of relationships and its impact on outcomes? I think that's a great question.
Yeah, so you can make a direct one-to-one correlation. You can also probably make a 10-to-1 correlation, depending on where and how this is. What we have seen and what has been our historic evidence is that people that are really good at relationship management build in a trusted environment, and often what is considered an emotional, non-rational workplace. Now, Gallup would tell you that almost every economic and every thought interaction occurs in a workplace, 70% of that is irrational or emotional based. Well, that's true of most relationships. It's very emotional based. So if you can build those relationships, you can build trust. And where trust exists, you can have transparency, you can have the opportunity to truly work together towards benefits. If I don't trust you, Rob, you can be as nice a guy in the world as you really are. But the reality is, if I don't trust you, if I haven't built a meaningful relationship with you, I may not really want to work with you, and I will be very suspicious. when you're working with outcomes, no matter what they are, financial, clinical, community, population health, whatever, you have to work in a collaborative environment today. There is no isolation. Now, sure, I'm sure there's some jobs that are isolated still. I'm just generalizing and saying, really, none of our jobs moving forward will be isolation-based jobs. We will work across huge spectrums without direct reports in collaborative and matrix environments, all having to work and actually somehow enjoy each other. You've proven it. Everybody on this call has proven it. Every one of you figured out how to do it over Zoom, WebEx, Teams, and every other platform none of us really want to use, but we do, and we figured out how to make it work.
Thanks, Russ. And you trust me, right?
I do, absolutely. You're awesome.
So considering 5G speeds, how long will it take VPN services to transform their broadband to allow these speeds on secured connections?
So we have a lot of partnerships, and I know you all do, and I saw some of the names pop up and down, where we get to spend a little time with them behind the magic curtain, not too far behind the magic curtain, but just far enough back where we can listen to some of these great leaders in their organizations. The reality is this is no longer a technical issue. This is probably a deployment and government policy issue at this point. There are plenty of examples, and I'm sure you've probably heard Dr. Shafiq Robb talk. He's now at Wellforce, one of your upper Northeast guys now in Massachusetts. He was able to deploy a 5G pilot program in a matter of days in Eastern Chicago. So this is no longer a technology issue, but rather how fast we deploy, get end devices. I mean, like many of you, even having a cell phone used to be, okay, this is a 2, 3, 4 year investment. The reality is now the way technology is changing, these are becoming disposables. Very expensive disposables, by the way, but disposables in mindset, because the technology now, the adoption is going to be so fast. And we didn't really go into it today. I talk a lot about Netflix and some of the data on them. They believe the change cycle for major technology overhaul is about 12 months. Could you imagine any one of these provider organizations, or you going in to suggest a sales model to them to say, hey, everything you bought 12 months ago, I want you to make obsolete and buy all brand new stuff. They'd laugh you out of the, well, they may do more than laugh at you, but they'd at least laugh at you and say, there's no way. But that really is the mindset of what we're going to have to think. We're going to be working in a massive change, that upper part of that curve we talked about in the lily pad, where technology is going to change so fast that we will not have the ability to keep up with it.
Great, thank you. So Russ, you mentioned you're speaking to a lot of healthcare execs in both the vendor and provider space across the globe. What are they saying about the future of healthcare delivery? Can you expand on that?
Yeah, so it's interesting. And again, I'm not suggesting anything. I am an apolitical person, except for my personal life, obviously. But what's interesting is if you look at what happened during COVID, many other countries, if not all other countries, reacted differently. Now, I wouldn't say their outcomes were any better, but they reacted differently because their payment model was different in that. So I think as we continue down this path of value-based care, and we continue down this model, it will be significant economic changes. I'm not smart enough. I'm not an economist from a healthcare perspective. I don't understand all of that. What I will say is, I think there's zero doubt we will continue to see economic change in healthcare. Where economies change or the economics change, therefore also the behaviors change as we move forward, as we continue to do the things that we need to do. Now, what will happen is a good example. I mean, the cost overhead of running a finance institution is a fraction of what it was relative to what it was 20 years ago. Why? Because you don't need a whole lot of people inside a bank anymore. You only have a few. If I ever go, which is about once a year, to my local Chase Bank up the street here, there's 2 people in there. Could you imagine 20, 30 years ago walking into a bank and only seeing 2 people inside an entire bank? It's different mindset. So I think what we're going to see is a continued pace of change, but a lot of it will be economic driven and policy driven. That's US. Across the globe, what we are seeing everywhere, even in countries that have historically had issues with being able to adopt technologies and change. Pick an example like India. What they're doing is they're leapfrogging. They're not waiting to take the next change, the next change, the next change. They're jumping 3, 4, 5 changes ahead at a time, and then waiting and then jumping 3 or 4 times. So we're going to see a lot of radical change across the globe.
Okay. This is kind of related to what you're saying about change. The question came up, do you think healthcare institutions can keep up with the pace of change? And then in parentheses, it says financial resource capability, or is there a need to rely on startups or other companies?
So the answer is even more complex than just startup and other companies. The reality is the game of healthcare, and I don't mean that to demonize it. I'm just using it as in a way to express this. The game has new players and a different way to play the game.
Right.
I would have never imagined sitting in a CIO or a CEO seat in healthcare 10 years ago or 15 years ago that major partner/competitors would be Walmart and Amazon and Google and companies like that. It would have never even crossed my mind that my primary care clinic's primary competition might be CVS and Walgreens and Walmart. It just wouldn't have crossed my mind. Now they are. There's far more commercials here locally where I live in Atlanta, Georgia, for Walgreens clinics, CVS clinics, and Walmart clinics than there are for any other providers in the rest of the city, a huge urban area. So as you think through that, the competitive landscape is changing. They're not coming in wanting your really complex, low-pay patients. They're not coming in to do really surgeries. What they're doing is they're figuring out what's the low-hanging fruit, what's the decent margin, large volume things they can do. I mean, what is Amazon great at? They're not great at running warehouse. They're great at supply chain and fulfillment. What do we do a lot of in healthcare? Supply chain and fulfillment. So many of them are probably eyeing your entire materials distribution system as either a partner or as an opportunity. So I think no matter what we're going to partner, you're already doing it. Many of you are pushing things to the cloud. I'll just take an example of Chime. The only technology we own anymore is some laptops and some basic networking stuff for a couple of our offices. Other than that, everything's in the cloud. I mean, 100% cloud-based. We have no technology that we really own anymore other than the basic devices to connect to it. More and more organizations are moving in that direction. I'll just give one little example. We can move to the next question, but I talked to a CIO in January, very renowned CIO, very important in the industry, very much a thought leader. This person, when we were talking about cloud, said, we're going to test base some of these things. We're going to figure out if this really works and we can keep it secure, and we'll just do maybe 5% of our infrastructure. Talked to that person again about a month ago, and the answer was, we're putting everything in the cloud and we're getting out of the data center business. That's how fast things change. And what they said was, in today's world, how fast things have changed, I'm not really sure I'm going to stay in that business anymore. I may not be in the tech business anymore. I may just be in the information flow. Now, that's an exaggeration because you're still going to be providing a ton of technology, medical equipment, networking, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But kind of the core of I host everything's mindset has now come crashing down.
Great. So we've got a few more questions here from Paul. Thanks for sending the chatbot link, by the way. Penn, so curious if you're aware of any strains occurring with network traffic with inundation of remote learning, workforce, telemed, conference too, ! Have heard anecdotal reports of outages, slowdowns, any word on how the infrastructure is holding up and vendors are responding?
Well, no, I've never heard any reports. They don't send those to me. What I will say is I think we are actually testing the ends to the max of their capabilities, rural environments, people's homes that are a little bit off the grid, and probably more, it's actually the bandwidth within a home. When you've got kids now doing their streaming classes because they're not in the classroom, and you've got, a couple in a home and they're actually both trying to do their remote work, and then 4 o'clock hits and they're streaming a video or playing games. There's actually a lot of home issues. We still have 2 of our team members who just can't get a reliable signal to their house. They live out kind of in the boonies, and they've tried everything and they can't. Now, whether there's big, massive issues, I don't know. I really don't. And there may be, I just never heard of it.
Okay. 2 more questions that I see. Should healthcare organizations develop a role for change management officer, similar to innovation officers? Could you share any examples?
Yeah, it's a perfect time to say that we actually hosted a learning event, an innovation event with one of those leaders that does just that, Sarah Richardson, who's on our board, a leader in Optum. Basically her whole role is to help people change and to help people through that process. And it is interesting listening to her today talk about how many things we're really bad at, and not because to be self-degrading. It's just none of us in healthcare really were trained to be those type of people. Now, granted, maybe the few psychologists and mental health professionals we have are good at that, but the rest of the organization isn't. And as we change, it does take a different mindset to lead change than it does to manage change. And so I do think we need to, one, train everyone. First and foremost, everyone needs to be trained in change leadership, even if nothing else, awareness training of understanding what this means. And we pushed everybody to probably a near breaking point during this process in COVID in change leadership.
Okay.
Then the other part of this is there are probably key individuals, especially senior IT leadership, that really need to understand, deeply involved, helping human beings move from one point to another, organizationally, philosophy, whatever the case may be. And in some organizations on their side, yeah, definitely you need a change leadership leader that really can help the organization go through that kind of change. And there's probably existing people in organizations that can flex up to those jobs too.
Okay. Some information from Eileen. I'm not sure if it's a question or a statement, but it says virtual care has already decreased in our area because insurance companies are not covering it. More patients need to actual visit the MD. So it's taking longer to get an appointment. Are you seeing that or any feedback on that?
Yeah, again, the example I used, the person said, well, we went from 5% up to 98% and back down to 28%. I think it was 4% back to down, up and then back down. Well, pick anything in your industry that's ever gone up sevenfold in 1 year or 1 month, and you maintain that. That's yeah. There are going to be insurance players that don't want to do this, and there are flexibilities in Washington. We're waiting to get codified and put back into permanency. There are definitely those issues. My concern is actually not that insurance companies aren't going to pay for it. We want that to be codified and put back in place. My concern is if we don't find a way to actually put this into a stable environment. Part of that is payment, but part of it's just a stable service being provided by our normal care providers in our organizations. Other disruptors are going to say, why do I care? I'll hire a person and they can do telemedicine all day, because if they just come and get their drugs or their other supplies from me, I'll still make more money. And so sometimes thinking we're saving money by cutting it out of insurance or whatever enables other disruptors. And that is a potential here as this continues to, for lack of a better term, shake out. There is the opportunity here for us to present other disruptors into the industry. I talked to one health system in India who said they eye their number one target for telemedicine to be the United States. Perfect example.
Okay, great. I think that's all the questions I have. Diane, keep me honest if I missed any, but I believe we look good. I'll do some closing comments in our gift card giveaway. Oh, we have one more coming over hot off the presses. When and how will the rationalization in healthcare finally lead to lower premiums?
So I'll leave with a bit of sarcasm, because if I could answer that really, I wouldn't be here. I would probably, I wouldn't want to be in a Washington position either. So never mind with that even an analogy. So I'll just use the great Winston Churchill's idea. Americans can always be counted on to do the right thing when we've tried everything else. So in this case, I think we're going to continue to try to do other things until we break a system so much that we don't have any resolve. We need the resolve to fix the problem, which really is to get costs down where they need to be. I would love to tell you I have a great answer, but I don't.
Okay. Well, thanks, Russ. Thanks again for this very interesting and engaging presentation. As always, I love to see your presentations and the Q&As are always great with you. So we're right on schedule. I really appreciate your time. So if there's nothing else, I'm going to just close out with a couple of things. Again, please visit the virtual exhibit hall to see the different products and services for our chapter sponsors. And there's a lot of great prizes there. So feel free to fill out their forms, visit the different partners out there, and want to also do our winner for the $200 gift card. And drum roll, please. It is Sherry Beck from RWJ Barnabas. That's exciting. They've got a lot of representatives here from RWJ, so that's great to see. So just a reminder, please join us on our closing technology disruptors panel, which begins at 4 o'clock. We'll have John Hewlett from New Jersey Innovation Institute moderating. The panelists will be Andy Cohen from Virtua, Kat Collard from Christiana Care, and Kimberly Burris from CHOP. So that's all we have for now. And thanks again for joining, everyone. And thanks, Russ.